Hi there, my name's Roseanna and I work with the students in Just Love Exeter, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about committee meetings. Now, I imagine you didn't look at the website and think, that's the session I'm most interested in, the session on meetings, and that's because sometimes meetings have a bad reputation, and I'd love you to just pause the video now and think, what are your perceptions of meetings? Some people can be a bit hesitant to join committee because they don't love the idea of signing up to lots of meetings. And I totally get that. Meetings can be renowned for being a bit boring. But meetings are actually the backbone of a lot of what we do. Research shows that about 15% of your working time will be spent in meetings. And if that's the case, it's really important to learn how to do them well and even how to enjoy them. Over the years, we've had lots of students say that they found this session surprisingly so helpful for transforming the way that they view meetings on their committee year and setting them up really well for the workplace. In Just Love, we think that meetings can be really exciting spaces of ideas and actions and forming plans. And the reason that we think that is because we don't think meetings themselves are the problem. It's often the way that we structure or conduct them. So whether you are a bit hesitant about all the meetings involved in committee, or maybe you're even nervous because you have to lead some, this session aims to answer those questions, calm those concerns, and help you think about the best way to structure and lead your meetings as a team. Now, the key idea from this session comes from a chirpy American man called Patrick Lencioni, and he writes a book called Death by Meetings. If you want to look it up and go even deeper on this topic, feel free to get a copy. And his idea is that in order to have better meetings that are life-giving and exciting, you need to have more meetings. Now that might sound counterintuitive, so let me unpack it and I'll give you a scenario. I want you to imagine this. It's 8:30 in the morning in the middle of term and you have a 9 a.m. lecture. Pop into the bathroom to clean your teeth before going out, and your housemate joins you too. He starts saying something a bit like this. We've run out of toilet paper, so I'll pop and get some from the shops after the lecture, which does actually make me think we might need to relook at how we do budgeting and kind of how much things cost as a house, just because economics class kind of scared me the other day, thinking all about the cost of living crisis and how much everything is, and it's all kind of confusing. It made me kind of worry about what I'm going to do after uni and finding a job. What are you going to do when you graduate? That was a lot of questions and a lot of different kinds of questions, particularly while you're brushing your teeth before a 9 a.m. lecture. Different kinds of conversations need different contexts. It's hard to talk about life admin and long-term future plans and big existential questions all in one go. And the same is true of meetings. During your time on committee, you will talk about so many different things and they're not all in the same category. A discussion about the practicalities of an event like who's cooking is not the same as talking about how to diversify your Just Love group, so it better represents your Christian community on campus. Discussing the practicalities of events uses different skills and requires a different kind of thinking to the kind of thinking you need when you're thinking about diversity. It can be a bit disorientating to jump between two different kinds of conversations. You probably won't get the best outcomes from that. We need different kinds of meetings to have different types of conversations. We need different structures. We might need to prepare for those conversations differently. And that will all affect the type of meeting you have. So let me introduce you to a model that we recommend. I'm going to introduce you to 3 different types of meeting, and we really suggest that you adopt these as a team in the year ahead. When committees have stuck to this throughout the year, it's really helped them thrive. We think it's the best way for you to communicate well together, to stay in the loop and be productive and make meetings life-giving, exciting spaces. Now, it might be slightly hard to visualize this if you haven't had any committee meetings yet, but just trust me that the framework really will help. So, Patrick Lencioni suggests 3 types of meetings. The first is called a weekly tactical. The second is called a monthly strategic. And the third is a retreat. And we'll walk through each of those together and unpack them. But before we dive into those 3 meetings, there's kind of a step beforehand, and that is about communication for you as a team. It's really important in the day-to-day of your committee that you keep each other in the loop about what's going on and what everyone's working on. Why? So that work isn't duplicated, so that everyone feels in the loop. And also in order to save time talking about the small details when you actually get into a meeting. Now, these kind of little check-ins are for news flashes of information. You would want to tell people things like, met with the CU presidents, it went super well and all of us are excited for the term. Or, hey guys, I booked the coffee shop on campus for the launch event. Now, you could do these check-ins and keeping each other in the loop through different ways. You could use WhatsApp, you could use a platform called Slack or Facebook Messenger. They're all helpful. And I'd encourage you to discuss with your committee the best way that you'd like to communicate. My personal encouragement would be to use something like Slack, because otherwise Just Love stuff can kind of get mixed up with your other life admin that you might do on WhatsApp. Sometimes that can be hard to keep on top of things and it can feel overwhelming. Having a separate platform means that you keep your Just Love commitments apart from your day-to-day life. The key thing here is to try and keep any discussions off your platform. Otherwise you end up having 50 notifications and no one reads them. Keep any updates simple and short. If it starts to turn into a conversation, say, let's talk about that in the next meeting. I'd encourage you to pause the video now and consider, what would your communication preferences be? Have you discussed this already with your committee? So pause the video now and have a think about that. Great. We're going to dive into the first type of meeting, which is the weekly tactical. And these are your weekly committee meetings where you'll focus on the details. And it's called a tactical because within your wider dreams and strategies that you have for your Just Love group, you're going to need to get into the tactics to get you there. There's sort of step-by-step details in order to reach your goals, and you'll learn more about things like strategy and tactics in the strategy workshop when you watch that recording too. For example, in a tactical, you might be talking about the plan for upcoming Just Lunch events, discussing the food or maybe the icebreaker games. You'd save the bigger kinds of conversations about the theme for a whole term for your strategic meetings, which I'll come to in a minute. It's important for everyone to be at your weekly tacticals, and so don't rob people of your presence. You were asked to be on committee for a reason, and so come to those committee meetings and be committed to that weekly tactical. That means that you need to find a time that works for everyone, whether that is 8 a.m. in the morning or 8 p.m. You'll need to find a time that works for your whole team so that you can stick to that weekly meeting. And we do really recommend that they are weekly. The teams that have managed to stick to that rhythm throughout the year always say that they're really pleased they did. Now, these meetings don't need to be more than an hour, ideally shorter, something like half an hour. And it's helpful to remember the key point from Patrick Lencioni. Having more meetings, but keeping them focused and shorter will mean that you have better meetings. And you'll need a bit of a rhythm and a structure for your weekly tactical. So this is what we would suggest. Firstly, start with a progress review, where you're looking at how things have gone in the past week. You might want to talk about attendance at the last Just Lunch, or maybe how a social media post was received. Think about the measurable data, the kind of numbers that you could look at, but also any feedback you might have got. Remember not to get into deep discussion at that point, just gather all the information. For example, we had 10 people sign up to the book club this week, or 20 people were at Just Lunch, or Jessica seems really excited to get involved in the book club. That sort of quick check-in should be no more than about 5 minutes, maybe even 30 seconds. Then you'll move on to step 2, which is the lightning round. And here you want to give each person in the room something like 1 minute to indicate their top priorities for the week, so you all feel in the loop. For example, maybe a personal coordinator could say, book the chapel for the next prayer and praise. I've met with people that are interested in starting a politics chat. And the person that's in first year who's really excited about the worship events, I'm going to meet up with them too and talk about how they can get involved. You might want to also give yourself a score for how busy the week is to see if people need support maybe in the week ahead. You might also want to bring something fun and light into that section. You could ask a fun question of each other to spark some lightness and some joy. Then you'll want to move on to your discussion round. And this is where all of the things that have come up in your first two sections can be talked about. So there might be a few pre-written things on your agenda, but also the things that have come up as you started to bring up the issues from the week that's just gone. So, for example, you might want to think about talking about the next step in setting up the politics discussion group, or how to invest in the first year that seems really excited about getting more involved in the worship nights. Now, your weekly tactical meetings need to be about specific short-term topics. If you start to drift into conversations that are more long-term, note them down to come back to for your strategic. For example, if you're talking about last week's Just Lunch, you might think about small improvements that can be made for the next week. But if you start chatting about how there aren't that many freshers involved, how could we get more of them involved? That's a bigger conversation that you'd want to save for a strategic meeting. When that happens, I'd suggest you have something called a strategic shelf, which is just a document where you note down any of the strategic conversations coming up so that you can come back to them at a later time. That way that you can do those conversations properly and do them justice. If you try to do them in a tactical, you'll either run over your meeting time, and that doesn't honour people's time and their boundaries, or you won't do the conversation properly. Just want to add a side note as well, that even though we're suggesting to keep these meetings short, that doesn't mean that's the only time you can see each other in the week. Agree to a time that you'll stick to, but you can also leave more space for things like prayer, catching up, checking in, but still try and be clear on the boundaries so people know when they're released to go and do other things. Now, I'd love you to take another pause on the video, digest the information you've heard so far, and write down anything that you will want to action. Great. We'll look at our next type of meeting, which is the monthly strategic. Now, remember our key points, having more types of meetings makes them more fruitful. So our next meeting is the strategic, and over the course of the month, like I said, you might have a few moments where you drift from a tactical discussion to a strategic, and that's where you'll have these conversations. Some examples of a strategic conversation might be something like making plans for the term ahead, or discussing partnerships with other societies, or thinking about your handover process when it comes to that next year. In a strategic meeting, you'll want to try and keep things, maybe only pick 2 or 3 discussion points so that they can be fully fleshed out, grappled, you can question things together and really get to the bottom of them. With these meetings, unlike a tactical, it's important that you prepare. So sending out the agenda in advance, giving people time to think, particularly if your internal processes on your team, it's good to give people a heads up about what you're talking about. Strategic meetings are really exciting spaces. You're going to be problem solving big challenges, fleshing out big dreams. So make sure you do them justice by preparing beforehand. As well as things that come up throughout the term, your monthly strategics are supposed to be used for planning. The dream is to end one term with at least a skeleton of the next term planned out. So use your monthly strategic to make sure you've got your term plan sorted for the next term. My top tip would be never finish a monthly strategic without the next one being booked in. People get pretty busy and it's hard to find time for a longer meeting. You'll need about 2 to 3 hours for a strategic conversation, so make sure you get them booked in advance. We'll move on to talking about our third type of meeting, which is a termly retreat. Now, this is the time when you get space from the day-to-day and month-to-month rhythms of running a Just Love group You get to think big picture and just breathe and have quality time together. It gives you time to reflect on the kind of more holistic picture of Just Love. It's not a space to plan, it's a time to reflect, celebrate and enjoy being a team. So what could you use your retreats for? Here's a few ideas. Firstly, you could use them as a space to reflect on your team dynamics. Think about what's going well, what are the areas that you could work on. It's important to have enough time to be open and vulnerable, so a retreat is a good space for that. You can bring in celebration, talk about the things you're enjoying, encourage one another, pray for each other, and have those longer conversations about how your team is getting on. Retreats are also a great place for some blue sky thinking if there were no barriers, what would we do as a Just Love group? If there are no limits to our time or our finances, what could we achieve? That creative thinking could be really exciting for thinking about the future of your Just Love group. Not just planning and being practical, but thinking big. So you could also look through some of your core skills as a Just Love group. These are on the committee resource drive, and they're the set of skills that will help you as a team really thrive. So you could focus on one or two, for example, leadership development or creativity. Have some space to think about how you're doing those well and how you might want to improve them. It's also a really great space in your retreat to engage in some spiritual rhythms together. Bible study, prayer, maybe practicing some silence and solitude as a team. And of course, it's a great space to have fun together and to celebrate. And that might be through meals or doing an activity. I've done retreats with Just Love groups where they've had a games night or they've gone to a beach. Just something that will help you to be together and have fun. And I'd suggest that a retreat is anywhere between half a day to even 2 days if you can have the longer space. If you can do a retreat once a term, you'll be smashing it as a team, and I promise it will make a really big difference to your team dynamics. Again, I'd suggest you pause your video here, brainstorm for a minute. What are some, a few things you would love to do on a retreat? Whether that's activities or spiritual rhythms that your group could do. Okay, so we've covered the 3 types of meetings, and you'll come to each of them with different expectations, and that will make each one more fruitful. Might sound quite full on, like there's a lot of information there, but ultimately remember, by doing more types of meetings, you'll actually spend less time in meetings and have more things done because you'll be more productive. Now that we've got our framework, I also wanted to give you some top tips, some characteristics of really good meetings to make them more successful. So I've got 5 for you. The first one is to set expectations. Now, it's a bit of a precursor to this one. We've already mentioned that having expectations for a meeting is important, but it's also important to have expectations of each other. People might be coming onto a committee with different backgrounds and different expectations, and it's good to make sure you're all on the same page. So you might want to set up a bit of an expectation list for you guys as a team, both for your team as a whole, but also in particular how you want to commit to things together in your meetings. As a few suggestions, you might do things like, say, we will have a no phones policy in our meetings. That means actually putting them away, not having them on the table. You might say we want to commit to really listening to each other and not interrupting. You might want to commit to having a policy where you don't have sort of in-jokes or comments that others might not understand, especially if maybe a few of you are all from one church and it can be easy to exclude someone else. Those kinds of expectations will benefit your whole committee and it will make your meetings more fruitful. Again, I'd suggest you to just pause your video now and consider what else will benefit your meetings. Is there anything else that you would find particularly helpful personally to make sure that you can bring your best to a meeting? If you're an external processor, for example, you might say to your team, I'd find it really helpful to have moments of quiet so I can think. The next top tip is to embrace conflict. Patrick Lencioni, who wrote the book we've been thinking about, also is a coach for organisations about how to be a great team. And he has 5 key points that show that a team isn't functioning very well, 5 dysfunctions of a team to watch out for. And one of them is about avoiding conflicts. We all have different relationships with conflicts, and to make meetings work, we actually can't shy away from it or brush disagreements under the carpet. When conflict comes knocking, we need to let it in and embrace it. This isn't about letting arguments get out of hand or a failure to show grace to one another. Embracing conflict is actually about letting people's opinions be genuinely heard and wrestling through different perspectives and ideas to get the best possible outcome for you as a team. This is because when conflict isn't allowed, people feel unheard and their ideas undervalued. If we don't allow for disagreement to be voiced and discussed and resolved, then actually people won't back the final decision because they feel like they weren't really heard, and the disagreement festers into bitterness and hurt. So let's make sure everyone's really heard in a meeting. You're genuinely listening to each other and encouraging each other to bring different perspectives. Let's be willing to put new thoughts out there and learn to disagree well in the year ahead, even when it's uncomfortable. Genuinely try and buy into that as a team this year. You also need to be prepared to acknowledge your way isn't always right and come with the humility. Conflict doesn't mean that we're less united. It often actually ignoring conflict means that we are. So learn to disagree well. Doesn't mean that you don't like each other. It's a process of refining your ideas. So let's be people who are kind and gracious and really embody our value of embracing truth and humility. Next up is the key point of assigning a leader. So in every meeting, whether it's a tactical or a strategic, you'll need someone to lead and steer the conversation, managing the healthy conflicts and making sure that you have good action points. It doesn't have to be the same person each time, but if you have 1 or 2 people that lead meetings regularly, they'll get good at it. Often, if a group has a secretary, they'll lead the weekly meetings, but you might feel it's right for someone else to lead the strategics. For example, maybe the president, or if there's someone in your team that is a local coordinator and you're talking about volunteering, it would make sense for them to lead the meeting. What's really important is that everyone is clear on who is leading so that the conversations can be steered really well. So that's 2 more points to think through. If it's helpful, take another pause here and think about any actions you want to note down about your role or about someone else's on your team. Great, so there's 2 more top tips to think about. The next one is about follow-up. So often groups can have an amazing meeting, but their downfall is when they don't actually put anything into action. And if you come up with a system so that no one leaves a meeting and forgets what they were meant to do, that will be the best way of stopping that from happening. So generally it's good to have minutes and notes from a meeting, but that won't be enough. You really need action points in each meeting that say exactly what needs to happen, who is expected to do it, and when it needs to be done by. So how do you make sure that happens? Well, hello to the secretaries. This is your time to shine. Hopefully you'll know a bit more about your role from reading through your role-based notes or talking to your staff worker, but one of the key parts of your role is to follow up with the team. If you're not a secretary, take note. Being followed up by a secretary is part of their role, it's part of how they make the team function well, and it's not nagging. I've spoken to many secretaries over the years who feel a bit bad about chasing people up, but let's say from the start of this year, we're fully permissioning our secretaries to follow us up and keep us accountable to what we've said we would do. The last top tip is about prayer. Don't try and do all of this without prayer. We heard from Anna about the importance of prayer in both our devotion to Jesus and our pursuit of justice. So this isn't restricted to our quiet times or our prayer meetings as a group, and it's not restricted to the opening or the closing of a meeting either. We want to be open to God speaking to us and inviting him into our discussions. It might feel right to pray midway through a meeting. Maybe something's come up that you need to ask for wisdom about. Maybe there's a bit of tension and you want to pray for that and invite God in. It's really valuable to reset the whole team by fixing your eyes on Jesus together. So, take a final pause on this video, look over what we've covered so far, and then write down any questions that you have that you want to talk to your staff worker about, or that you want to talk to your committee about. Great, we're gonna land now by just thinking about what's next. So we've got our 3 types of meetings and our 5 characteristics that make a good meeting. And now I just want to land by thinking about what are you actually going to do at the start of your committee year. Got a little roadmap for the first few meetings. So rather than starting off your weekly tactical straight away, you as a team will need to have a few strategic meetings. That's because there's lots of things that you want to think about for the year ahead, big picture stuff, dreaming and planning, and you'll need some lengthier conversations for those. On this website, you'll find something called the post-JLET checklist for committees, and there we've detailed the kinds of conversations we think you should have and the actions you'll need to take. At the end of this video, go and find that list and note down what are the actions for you to do next and the conversations for you to have as a team. Thank you for listening, and my prayer for you in the year ahead is that meetings are genuinely that life-giving space where you can have fruitful conversations with your team, get to know them well, learn to disagree well, invite God into your conversations, and plan and dream and make action happen together as a team to see justice done both in your city and beyond. So enjoy your meetings in the year ahead.